Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our weekly family support Q&A. I'm delighted to be here with you today with a bunch of our colleagues from the ARC. I'm going to start off doing some introductions with our group today. And everybody that's here today, it was the first time they've been able to attend the Life Course Showcase. So I'm going to ask them to tell everybody a little bit about what that experience was like, whether it was what they expected or what kind of surprised and delighted them. So I think I shall start with Christina.
Hi, Sharon. Hi, everyone. My name is Christina Angolia. I'm the Assistant Director of Family Support at the ARC. Mainly, I oversee the respite program, but I also am a mom to an 8-year-old with developmental disabilities. And so I was interested in the showcase from a variety of angles. And I will say, I think I expected everyone to be at the showcase working on trajectories all day, and it wasn't quite like that. It was much more interactive. There were some really cool presentations. So it wasn't what I expected, but in a good way.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Christina. Ann Denman.
Hi, my name is Ann Denman. I'm a family resource specialist at the St. Louis ARC with the Capable Kids and Families program. And I work with families of young children birth to 7 with developmental delays and disabilities as a home visitor. I'm also the parent of a 19-year-old with developmental disabilities. Hard to believe that. And we are going through the process now of transitioning from high school to work. My son has graduated and is now working part-time, which is both very exciting and quite challenging. I think I also imagined at the Life Course Showcase that we would be practicing using the tools more that you find online. And I had recently finished Life Course Ambassador training with Sharon. And instead found there were a lot of different workshops on different topics. And the ones that I mostly participated in had to do with families, supporting families, working with families. And I benefited personally from learning about that topic as well as professionally, and how I would weave life course tools into the fabric of what I do with families in the Capable Kids and Families program.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. I think the first time I ever heard the phrase grassroots versus grass top parents was at Charting the Life Course, because they like to talk about this group of families who's very embedded in the field, the service language, because they work with people with disabilities in addition to being parents. But then these other families are really coming at it with a very pure experience and may not have the lingo and the confidence. So it's neat for me to kind of hear your points of view from both sides. So thanks. And last but not least, Hannah, glad you're here.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Satterwhite, and I'm a family navigator with the St. Louis ARC. And specifically, I work with families of teens aged 12 to 18. And so a lot of what I do revolves around education, planning for transition, looking at what those teens' lives may be like when they're an adult and how they can get there. And so this fits right in with the Life Course tools. So as Sharon said, it was my first time going as well. And I had heard about it for several years. I had heard that it was a great experience. So I definitely think it lived up to all the hype. I feel that people were very engaged. The folks that I spoke to who were attending the conference were really ready to dive in, excited to use some creative thinking skills and planning skills. And there were quite a few self-advocates that I had the pleasure to sit in on their talks. So I'll talk about that in a little bit, but it was really wonderful. So I'm excited I could be there.
Thank you for sharing that. That was actually my thing that surprised and delighted me last year. I didn't get to go this year, but the increase in not only participation, but leadership from our self-advocates at the conference was really, really powerful 2 years ago. And I think they continued to own the stage this last year. And I think being able to learn from people with disabilities and their families is such an important part of attending an event like that. So I'm glad you had that experience too. So I want to start with you, Hannah, because I know that you have some things that you wanted to share from attending some of the sessions that the self-advocates led. Let's start with them.
So there was a group that I personally recognized, which was so delightful to see familiar faces. There was a presentation breakout session based off of self-determination and self-advocacy skills. And so some folks from Easter Seals Midwest were there, as well as some folks from the Life Course Nexus. Susie Parker from St. Charles People First was one of those. And so it was great seeing her. And they gave a presentation about how they put self-determination in action using the Life Course tools. There's a wonderful group called the COOL group. They named themselves COOL, which stands for Charting Our Own Life Course. And it's a group of self-advocates that came together to work together on problem solving, planning for their future, and building their leadership skills and self-advocacy skills. They talked a lot about how they supported each other through some tough times. Being a young adult is challenging and exciting, and all the things that come with growing up and figuring out what's next in your life is huge. And so for this group, they all were, I think, around the same age, early 20s, a type group of folks. And so they got to put their heads together and talk about what they wanted to see out of their own lives. And in that, some of them have gone on to have more speaking engagements. They have, a couple of them have won the Mental Health Champion Award. They've supported each other through growth over the couple years that they've been working together in this group. So I thought that was wonderful. It was so incredible to hear about what's going on with self-determination around the state and particularly in our area. And so that was super exciting for me to see. It was kind of like brain candy, like just watching people succeed and have fun and work together. It was amazing. So I really enjoyed that presentation.
All right. So shameless plug. Can anybody be a part of the COOL group? How do you get to be part of the COOL group?
So from what I understand, Easter Seals Midwest has a My Life, My Rights course, and also self-determination leadership groups. And so you can contact Easter Seals Midwest about getting engaged. And I believe anyone from several counties can participate. But the folks that I know are mostly in St. Louis City County and St. Charles. They definitely have that information available on their website, Easter Seals Midwest.
And I will tell you, if you're too far away or if you're a great independent learner, you can go to the Missouri Developmental Disability Council website and go to trainings for individuals and families and click through to the Charting My Life course curriculum. Once you complete that curriculum, you can submit your certificate and then you'll get an invite to the COOL group. So I strongly encourage you to do that. I think all of us, especially at that age, you're right, Hannah, want to have support from our peers to help grow both professionally and personally. And it's really neat to see them have that support for each other. Yay. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to shift to you, Ann Denman, because I understand that one of the sessions you really liked was about supporting families to connect with each other. So while we're talking about support, how did that play out from the family perspective?
Well, I just participated in a lot of workshops and talks, discussions, most of which were led by family members of individuals with developmental disabilities, whether those were siblings, parents, also led by self-advocates. And what struck me so much was the need to build support networks with people who understand, people who are there to care not just for individuals with developmental disabilities, but to care about them. And how important it is to cultivate those networks of support. And oftentimes, I think in the younger years, that happens much more naturally when you have very young children, because we get together a lot with other parents. As my son got older, I felt that it was really, really important to connect with other families of children with developmental disabilities, just having people who understood what it was like and the unique challenges faced by families of children with developmental disabilities. And so I began to involve myself in a lot of different learning and advocacy groups, education groups. And that was a strong support network. But I would definitely concur that the more we can help to cultivate networks of support that feel natural for our loved ones and for our families, family members of people with developmental disabilities, the better we all do, because otherwise it can just feel quite lonely and isolating. And sometimes that process of cultivating those networks of support feels pretty daunting, because you think, well, I don't have that many friends who are able or willing to play this role in our lives of support. But it really helped me just listening to the different speakers and then talking to the cohort that I went to the Ambassador Series with. It challenged me to think outside of my own box about who my support network is, for myself and also for my son, James. And I realized that the people who most take an interest and feel the most genuinely compelled to participate as supporters for our family are the people I work with, who are people who have a shared sense of mission, as I do. And so re-seeing my work community, I've become friends with so many of my coworkers, but redefining my own community, suddenly I discovered that I had a lot more support than I realized. So I think in the work that I do with families of young children with developmental disabilities, and it can be a very overwhelming time, but I think helping them to see networks of support or just individuals who may be of support that maybe they hadn't really quite thought of before as they're seeking out supports for their family.
I think a lot of times we think, oh, the people at work, the people that already have a family member with a disability, they're already tapped out, they're maxed out. But sometimes that shared ability to share a situation and work together can really be the best possible solution. I was thinking as you were talking about our children's event that happened recently and watching the families pair off and get to know each other and make those connections. Sometimes having another family that you can go to a play date with or say, hey, I could watch your kids this week if you could watch mine next week could be a huge advantage.
It's huge. It's really huge. It can't be understated how great that need for support and natural support is. And when I say natural, just people who understand, people that you become friends
Yeah.
with because of shared experience.
Christina, I'm going to jump in and see. I know you went to that same session. Was there something that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, Anne and I did overlap on this one. I think it was called Building Personal Networks, or I think other people call it Circles of Support. I found it really helpful, like Anne, on a personal level. I thought it was really empowering to hear that you're creating a think tank for your loved one, and it's not a lifelong commitment, but many people do commit after they've been involved and formally asked. And so they even encouraged us, setting a couple times a year where you bring this group together to talk about Lily. Well, sorry, that's my daughter, but to talk about your loved one and to talk about what their needs are and, what has improved, what maybe hasn't improved, and to just bring these folks together. They don't even have to geographically be here. The person who would become my child's guardian actually lives in Washington State. So could we do a hybrid and do a Zoom and have some people over to the house and make it an event and have fun and kick ideas around and see what other network resources they can bring to bear to help Lily, or even just idea, problem solving, I guess I would say. One presenter in particular talked about starting a business with her son, who, she was concerned about the transition age. He's a little younger. And the personal network really helped her to kind of problem solve how to get him more skills and how to start this business and to help him, become successful. And he's doing great. Yeah.
Oh, I love stories like that. And I do think it's not an easy task, but it's a worthwhile task. So most of the things that our families tackle aren't easy, but we're at the ARC, we'd love to strategize with you if that's something that's a priority in your life, to see if we can help move that bar forward. Because I think it's a constantly evolving situation. We're going to just need to look at it repeatedly. One of our first Q&As was with Micah and Janice Fialka Feldman. And Micah has the most amazing circle of support that I've ever encountered. He's been working at a university 600 miles away from his parents now for almost a decade, and he still gathers together his circle via Zoom for meetings a few times a year. But they shared in that previous Q&A kind of how that all started in 3rd grade, when he would have kids over in a pizza party and the kids would start talking about what they thought Micah should be doing. And so it really made, they started to help him shape his own life from that point forward, which was really cool. So many good conversations. Hannah, you said that you also went to some presentations about IEPs and how to maybe take a little bit more control over the conversation in IEP using Charting the Life course. Tell us a little bit about that.
So one of the presentations I went to was another familiar face, Anna Montaldo, who is the president of the St. Louis Region People First chapter. She spoke a little bit about how she tailored her IEP plan specifically for her own goals, which didn't really align with what the rest of the students were doing. While some of them were doing vocational skills programs, doing things like working at Goodwill or things like that, Anna decided she knew what she wanted to do, and she wanted to promote her own brand. She wanted to start a YouTube channel, and she wanted to work on her own speaking about certain topics that were important to her. And so she was able to work with her school team to get this included in a way that she was able to spend her last years of high school. So that was one really wonderful talk. And then there was another that there was a presentation that SSD, St. Louis Special School District, was present, and the Princeton city schools from Princeton area were also there, and they talked about amplifying the student voice in IEPs. And this is very important because so often, I think in the past, students haven't necessarily always even been at their own IEP meetings. Usually it's, or I don't want to say usually, but maybe up until recently, it had been more parents and teachers and school personnel coming together to talk about what was right for the student. While, they discussed including charting the life course tools in the IEP. And I believe SSD is starting to do this, starting to phase this in. And we see it a lot in high school plans, but they also talked about the need to potentially bring this in sooner, maybe middle school or elementary school, and get parents and students familiar with the tools so that it's nothing scary or difficult or confusing that you have to learn and add on to what you're doing. It fits within the framework of these meetings that you're already having. And the goal would be to get to know what the student really is interested in. They're going to start making choices. They're going to start expressing their own desires and interests and needs well before, they're 17 and someone says, okay, what are you doing for the rest of your life? So the goal is to get them involved as soon as possible so that it's not a big scary thing when someone asks you to make your own decision for the first time at 17 or 18.
I think that's one of my favorite things about the showcase is to be able to have a presentation that's done by both our local community, but then also people from Princeton, New Jersey, who are also invested in this same process. And, the whole focus for me when we started to champion the Charting the Life course was the idea that it becomes a familiar set of tools, a familiar language, so that individuals and families aren't like having to learn new acronyms, learn new processes every year. This way that carries through with them across their life. And that gives you that sense of confidence to say, nope, this is what I want to have. And this is how I see it happening. So I love that you got to see the two of them kind of talk about something. And they probably both approached it in different ways, but they both got to the same goals. Because there's a lot of ways to get to the goals that you want. Depending on just what you've got at your fingertips and what makes sense to you in the moment. All right, Christina, you've been so quiet. I don't know how you've managed to hold back this long. You went to some sessions that were a little bit more broad-based about systems and programs and organizations. So I want to give you a chance to help wrap us up and talk a little bit about some of those things that are bigger picture items that are also part of Charting the Life course.
Sure. I want to talk about two sessions I went to in particular. One, I don't remember the formal title, but I'll call it Ohio. Multiple agencies in Ohio used Charting the Life course tools and planning strategies to basically reconfigure how families interface with their system. So their equivalent of like our MODESI, so our state school board of education, their equivalent of our Department of Mental Health, their equivalent of our Department of Health and Senior Services. They are all using the same intake forms. They're all using the same common language with the goal that, if a family moves, as often happens, it's not like they're having to recreate the wheel or they're coming in to encounter something they'd never seen before. I just am shocked at the level of coordination. I thought it was so cool. As this probably won't shock Sharon, but I view things a lot through an advocacy lens, and I see a great potential here for advocacy because I do think Missouri could work better for all of us if there was more coordination among these agencies. Yeah, I was just sort of blown away. And I did joke with one of the presenters later that, I'm going to move to Ohio, and they assured me that Ohio is not perfect. But in this way, Charting the Life course has really pushed them ahead.
There's definitely something in the water in Ohio. I'll just say they were the ones that really inspired me when we started taking our technology journey because they were a leap and a bound ahead of us there as well. So go Ohio. Missouri is on your tail though.
That's right. The other session that really made an impression on me was talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there was one presenter in particular, well, there were several, but there was one who brought up, she works at the National Association of State Directors of Developmental Disability Services. I'm not going to say that a bunch, but it's NASDS. And her role was helping to implement a DEI toolkit at the state level for agencies to kind of self-assess if they are doing a good job on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Their mission, NASD's mission, is to assist member state agencies in building person-centered and culturally and linguistically appropriate systems of services and supports for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. And so they view this DEI tool as very critical to the agencies that they serve and support. And within it, you can do a self-assessment of your own agency. You can think about ways that you have considered the person in the context of family and their family culture. Obviously, we all strive to deliver individual supports and we try to be culturally competent. That's always our goal, but have we really embedded that into our work? And I will say, in terms of the respite program, which is sort of my charge at the St. Louis Arc, I do think about how can we make processes smoother for families, simpler? How can we make our language more plain? Do we need to say something fancy or can we just be a little more straightforward about it? I've spent a lot of time in the last year or so thinking about how do we make processes more family friendly. And I really would like to take a deep dive on how do we make all of our, literature even more family friendly? How do we make our communications more friendly to people who maybe have lower literacy rates or parents who may have disabilities themselves? So I found the tool very powerful. I think it would be really cool for the ARC Ready Committee, which is kind of our DEI committee, to look at the tool and apply it to the ARC more broadly. But I'm really excited about it.
That sounds like a really good thing to share. I love that. And I want to just comment, since you brought NASD's up, that they're part of the founding community of practice that Missouri is a member of, community of practice in how to best support families. So I'm really fortunate to get to go to regular meetings with people from all of those statewide, state-led organizations where they really talk about what are we doing about these kinds of things. And so it's such a great space to sit and get sparked by ideas that other states are putting in place, or hearing how somebody else has tackled an issue. So I hope that's something that families take away from our conversation today, is that we've created this opportunity, this platform, framework of principles and tools, and a community that shares not only the values behind them, but the language around them. And that's allowing us to really dig into the way we provide services to you. Are we doing the best we can to meet your needs? Are we finding ways for you to take the lead and tell us what we need to be doing to provide you with support? So I'm so excited that you guys had a good experience at the Life Course Showcase. Families, if you're watching this and thinking, well, I want to go to that, I do want to remind you that many of your county boards fund conferences for families. They won't pay for your travel expenses or lodging, but they'll pay for the conference. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, we would be happy to help you connect and get some resources in place so that you can go. The conference is in the spring, so it's usually in April or May. So be on the lookout. But it's not just that conference. Any conference that you think is going to help you do a better job parenting, do a better job as a person with a disability, we're here to connect you and get the funding for that. I just want to give everybody a chance, if there's anything else that you'd like to say before we close about your experience at the showcase or anything else. Christina's unmuted, so you get to go first.
I just wanted to share, and I think I can't remember if Hannah or Ann said this already, but the networking was so powerful. I've gone to a lot of professional conferences in the last few decades, and usually you exchange cards and you never hear from someone. I've actually had follow-up email interactions with multiple presenters, people I just happened to sit next to at the event while we're getting a meal. So it felt really good to feel like you were in community with people who are ready to take action too.
I'll just share really quick that if you are an individual with a disability or a family member in the greater St. Louis region, and you don't know very much about life course tools, or you are interested in doing some planning, we have family navigators here at the ARC and elsewhere in the St. Louis region that would love to sit down and talk with you about future planning, transition, school, outside of school, getting a job, etc. Anything you can think of, we can life course it. So it's fun. It's doesn't have to be a chore. It can be exciting to look at all the ways you can plan for your future. So we're happy to help. So reach out if you want to learn more about these tools.
I just wanted to, I was just going to sort of echo a couple of things that Christina and Hannah had said about the power of networking, meeting other people with shared experiences, goals, and values is just a wonderful, wonderful and very empowering thing. And also being able to learn about the life course tools and how you can use them in so many different facets of life, in planning and decision making, goal setting, not just for individuals with disabilities, but for everybody in the family. It's such a helpful, positive, and empowering tool. And I have found personally that a lot of agencies and entities are beginning to work with the life course tools, for example, in special school district, in the Department of Mental Health. So it's a framework that is really gaining traction, not just in the disability world, but for all of us.
Agreed. I use it every day. So, well, thanks you guys. This was really, really fun. You know me, I could talk charting a life course every day, all day long. So thanks for those of you that joined us. I hope you'll think about checking out lifecoursetools.com and learning a little bit more about the framework. Call us at the ARC if you want to connect or learn more about building networks. We're here for you. So thank you and have a wonderful rest of your week. Thanks, you guys.